at both points in these two films, it's right before they relinquish power and die, only to become more powerful. They stop playing this game of competitiveness demonstrated through physical prowess and fighting ability, and out of love for others. And they rise to an entirely new level. And I think that's in some ways the Christian message, to let go of what we think is we think will make us happy. I think now is the time in the discussion that we have to talk about Star Wars.
Okay, let's do it.
Because I think what I'm so grateful for from the original trilogy of Star Wars was a different model of competency and power and effectiveness.
In Obi-Wan?
In Obi-Wan. That scene right there. Was he literally put down his lightsaber and said, I'm actually become more powerful than you can possibly imagine if you kill me and defeat me right now.
Yes.
I remember being a little child and being like, what? And it's largely unexplained how he became more powerful, but it's still very corporeal, right? He shows back up as a Force ghost and he transcends the natural order of the material world. But that didn't matter as much as just modeling for me that there's a whole nother level beyond physical prowess. And then it's reinforced in the second film by Yoda. And you're expecting, I imagine the first time watching that movie in 1970, or I think that was probably like 81 or maybe 78. I can't remember. But I mean, I was born in 80, so I didn't have this experience. But imagine you're tracking with Luke Skywalker, you're going through the swamp, and you're looking for this great Jedi, and you find this little creature who is the greatest Jedi ever. And is 900 years old and more powerful than any Jedi, and is so unassuming and so hidden and humble. And it's not about defeating others through competency. He didn't even want to be seen for all his power. And that, I think, even from that early age, started a trajectory for me of knowing that the goal I want to get to in the end is hiddenness. Even in all my competency being hidden. So the Blessed Mother, I think, is a great model for this, because she corrects you and you don't even know she's doing it. This is the great moms, the great women out there. They challenge you, and there's no they don't prick your ego. They don't have an ego, and it's the highest level of guidance. And that's where I want to get to as a man, where even if I'm helping someone, it's there's none of my ego. There's none of me needing to be seen. Literally letting go of the need to be seen, but still building up someone else's life through love. That all went back to Star Wars when I was a kid.
What do you think it was at being 5 and seeing that? Were you attracted to Han Solo? Were you attracted to other characters, or was it just the shock value?
I was still interested in who was the most powerful. So I still had the testosterone hormones,
right?
Flowing through me as a kid. I think when you're a child, it's the highest concentration of testosterone ever. My kid, everything's competition for my boy. And so I think there was that. So I was interested in who was the most powerful, but then it was just flipped on its head when the message was the most powerful is actually not the one, or one who could fight the best, but chooses not to. That it blew my mind even as a child.
It's the turn the other cheek.
It is.
In its fullest form.
Put down the sword, Peter.
Yeah. I did not have that moment until Shawshank.
Oh.
I watched Shawshank, and it was the scene in which oh gosh, I'm forgetting the main character's name.
Andy Dufresne.
Andy Dufresne, thank you.
Yeah.
He wins the crew beers on the top of the roof.
Yeah.
And he doesn't drink the beer.
Yeah.
There was something about that was he's playing a different game.
Yes.
He's above everybody, playing an entirely different game.
Yes.
And there's some selfishness in that in me, right? I want to play on a different game. Because I'd been hurt by the other game.
But to truly play on a different game, you can't want to play. You don't want to be above the game. If you want to be above the game, you're still in the game.
Yes, which is a recent revelation for me. But I remember that, like, they're playing it. He's on a different level than everybody else, and there's it's like Viktor Frankl talks about the last of human freedoms is your right to choose your attitude, right?
Yeah.
And he played a game in which there was something the Nazis couldn't touch, right? There's something Vader couldn't touch.
Yep.
He couldn't kill. He couldn't influence. He couldn't impact. There was a heightened level to Obi-Wan. Because I actually had a different experience. I saw it in theaters when they re-released it in theaters in the late 90s.
Oh, totally different.
That was my first experience of Star Wars.
And you were like, oh, these graphics are terrible.
Well, I was also enthralled with Obi-Wan. There was like a mystery to him.
But you had seen younger Obi-Wan first, right?
No.
Oh, you did see that first.
That was my first. I hadn't seen... The new ones came out...
Like 2000-ish.
Yeah, it was like late 90s where I was living. They pushed out... They did this every month. They released of the original trilogy. It was like June, July, and August.
Yes.
They released... And so I'm like watching it in theaters, really disliking Luke, having a heavy attraction to Han or Han, depending on who you speak with, and then being like,
it's Han. But
I know it's Han. I know it's Han.
I couldn't let that go.
Yeah, of course not.
I couldn't inhibit.
Why do I think Vader is the man? And then it was like, oh no, the greatest one of all is so obviously Obi-Wan.
Yes. What do you see as the connection between these two images?
Well, I guess I'm really curious about what you're going to say, your intentionality behind it. But I'll just tell you what struck me when I first saw both of them, which was more so the Balrog relative to Gandalf, was just the physical like power differential. So like the Balrog is massive compared to Gandalf, and Darth Vader is more menacing than Obi-Wan, and it seems like both the Balrog and Darth Vader win, but like they don't.
Little Gandalf is the only thing that stands between me and certain death. Oh, he's so small. Yeah, I think what's interesting about that is when you're watching the original films, the character of Vader looms very large and is very terrifying.
Yeah.
In a way that the Balrog is not. He's, relegated to a particular part of Lord of the Rings. He's in the second film when they go into Moria. But yeah, I like at face value looking at both, he looks more terrifying than Vader when Vader's about the same size as Obi-Wan. But the psychological projection onto Vader, like that, George Lucas does an awesome job of making you terrified. The first experience you have of Vader is he walks in and he just chokes out all those rebel soldiers, not Republic, they're rebels at that point, but those rebel soldiers, like mercilessly.
Yes.
And off we go.
And invincible, right? Like he's just like, how in the world can you possibly, he's like the Death Star, right? Like how in the world could you ever conceivably
blaster bolts don't stop him, he'll just stop him with his hand,
right?
Like
how does that possibly work? And it's like the whole point of the weakness of the Death Star is this one spot, and the weakness of Darth Vader is a sun, right? Like you find the weak point in the great evil, and it's
well, the reason I put both these images together is because to me they're a sign of like they're symbolic of the Paschal mystery of death and resurrection. At both points in these two films, it's right before they relinquish power and die, only to become more powerful. They stop playing this game of competitiveness demonstrated through physical prowess and fighting ability, and out of love for others. And they rise to an entirely new level. And I think that's in some ways the Christian message, to let go of what we think is we think will make us happy, especially as men, being competent and dominating, and just being elevated to a whole new kind of plane of existence.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, what's interesting about both of these films, and about, let's say, Obi-Wan and Yoda, and then like Gandalf, is that they're juxtaposed against just really powerful people who are like really cool. One of my favorite characters in all of Star Wars is Darth Maul with the double lightsaber. And Darth Maul is so attractive. Like, he's so cool.
He's very cool.
Very cool. To the point where I'm like, am I rooting for him against Qui-Gon? You know? Like, what?
There's something attractive about the power, the prowess.
Yes. And the force with which the definitive nature, and they're not inhibited by anything, and they're just sort of going for it. And it's like, that's the most attractive thing.
Yes.
And then you see Gandalf. I think it's in the Return of the King where you see him actually fighting the Balrog, like jumping off the cliff, finding his sword, and it's actually the most attractive thing when he becomes Gandalf the White. He's not playing the game.
No.
And he's untouchable on a whole other level.
He's not interested in the game.
He's not interested in it.
No.
And it's like, until you meet someone who's not interested in the game, the person who's dominating the game is the most attractive thing.
You know, I almost choked Dr. Greg Bottaro when he came on my show, because he made me watch A Hidden Life.
Oh.
Which was a hard watch.
Yeah.
A good watch, but it's like going on retreat. It's like painful to watch.
Yeah.
But something the protagonist says in that film is, when you let go of the desire to survive, a new light floods in.
Ugh.
It's like the last thing, the last kind of human thing that we hang on to. And then you are elevated to a different place. But it's very unnatural, and it's terrifying to trust that will happen. You know, but these are characters, these are both wisdom figures. They're hooded, they're cloaked, they're seeking hiddenness. They don't want to play the game anymore. They've transcended the game. And the villains of this, the villains always play the game. They never don't play the game. You see Gandalf later on communicate with Sauron after he's in the books, after he's imprisoned in Orthanc.
Yeah.
And he's still trying to compete and manipulate Gandalf, and Gandalf's just completely unaffected by that. And then ultimately you see Frodo get to that point with Sauron in the Shire. In the books, with the scouring of the Shire, he comes all the way back, and Sauron tries to goad him into some kind of competitive exchange of words and struggle and balance between the two of them. And Frodo's just like, nah, just let him live and let him go upon his way. There's been enough death. And Sauron's like, you've truly grown, Frodo. He at least recognizes it, that Frodo's not even playing the game anymore. But that's the goal for myself. That's where I want to get to.
Have you ever met anybody who's not playing the game?
Yeah, I have. I have a guest that I hope to have on the show eventually, who was my he was my mentor. He trained me to be a therapist. His name was Philip Scrofani, and he was going through cancer treatment the entire time he was teaching us to become clinicians. And I mean, he was he would be so embarrassed to hear me talking about this, thus proving that he's beyond the game. But I mean, he would teach courses from his hospital bed and be like, hold on 1 minute, class, and the nurse would come over and like change his whatever needed to be changed. And it was like,
wow. I
mean, he was just so devoted out of love to the students. And then I remember one time I went to go see him. It was in between semesters, so he was alone in his office, and I had an affection for him, and I sat down. I said, how you feeling these days? And he said, well, it was a little touch and go there for a while, but I had an experience of Christ that I wouldn't exchange for anything.
Wow.
I mean, he's staring down the gauntlet into the face of death, and he has an experience of Christ that he wouldn't trade for anything
Wow.
In his whole life, his wife and kids, like, I mean, talk about someone who's reached another level, you know. And I mean, he's an interesting man, and whenever you spoke with him, it wouldn't take long before you felt like he was taking care of you.
Wow.
No matter how sick he was, or he just had this ability to empty himself and live as self-gift for you, as if you're the only person on earth that mattered.
Yeah.
And it's just an inspiration to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.